Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of civil services examination. Today we have taken up Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 1st of March 2023. The articles that we shall take up today have been displayed on the screen. Let us now begin the discussion. Alright, so we'll blast off the discussion with a very important article which has appeared on page number 14. India should stick to the middle path in the new world disorder. This article has been written by a very prominent international relation analyst, Stanley Johnny. And this article has been written in the context of a very important vote in United Nations General Assembly, where a resolution that condemned Russia's invasion on Ukraine was tabled, and India has again abstained, which means India decided not to participate in the voting. India has consistently resisted international pressure to criticize Russia and its actions. And so in this article, Stanley Johnny explains why India should follow a path of multi-engagement and not multi-alignment. Now if you look at the UPSC syllabus, under GS paper 2, you have a part of IR, India and its neighborhood relations, bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India and or affecting India's interests, effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interests and Indian diaspora, important international institutions, agencies, fora, their structure and mandate is a part of your syllabus. Now, in this particular article, author almost summarizes the post-World War global international transition from bipolar world, which was demonstrated by the existence of two global superpower. One was US and another was USSR. Then since 1991 until 2015-16 unipolar world, which is demonstrated by the presence of single superpower, which is United States of America, and in recent 5 to 7 years transition towards multipolarity, where you cannot really say that there is one global superpower. Of course, US still continues to be important hegemon across the globe, but its power is eroding, and we have a lot of instances and evidences to suggest that. Now, it is important to understand all these contexts in detail. It is important to do so because if you don't understand the transition of Cold War and the instances of bipolarity, if you do not understand the instances of unipolarity and what were the demonstrations of unipolarity or the dominance of US, or if you do not have the clear-cut idea as to how the world is multipolar today and how do we see this multipolarity, you will not be able to understand why India and China are behaving the way they are behaving right now. Or for that matter, you will not be able to understand why is India not taking a clear-cut position in Ukrainian war? Why is India aligning with both US as well as Russia? Which is obviously quite contrary to what happened during the era of non-alignment, where the Indian government, the state of India, would openly and outrightly criticize the global superpowers in their violations of international peace and order. Or for example, what has made Iran so confident in its opposition of US? How can Russia carry out Ukrainian invasion in defiance of West? So, in order to understand almost everything related to international relations, understanding of post-World War II era is very important. And so in this regard, we are exactly going to do that, followed by a discussion on what are the options which are available in front of India. Let us now begin the discussion. So since the end of Second World War, the global order has seen two major transitions. After the World War, a bipolar world led by US and Soviet Union. So the bipolar world or bipolarity after the Second World War was a term used to describe the global political order that emerged in the aftermath of the war. It was characterized by the division of world into two superpowers. One was US and second, of course, was USSR or Soviet Russia, which were engaged in a tense and often hostile relationship known as Cold War. So the bipolarity resulted into the Cold War. And if you look at it, the bipolar world was based on the concept of balance of power, where two opposing superpowers, in this case US and USSR, tried to maintain a balance of power to avoid direct military confrontation. The United States and its allies formed the Western Bloc, while the Soviet Union and its allies formed the Eastern Bloc. The two superpowers engaged in a global struggle for influence, with each side seeking to expand its sphere of influence while containing the other. The bipolar world was marked by a number of events and policies, including the arms race, the space race, development of nuclear weapons, leading to a dangerous and unstable global situation. The bipolar world lasted from the end of the Second World War until the collapse of Soviet Union in 1991, which marked the beginning of the unipolar world led by United States of America as a sole superpower. So when we talk about bipolar world, some of the important instances which happened during the bipolarity, during the time when US and USSR were more or less equally powerful, we have the arms race. The arms race between US and Soviet Union was one of the defining features of the bipolar world. Both sides developed and stockpiled massive number of nuclear weapons, leading to a dangerous and unstable global situation. But it was just not limited to the arms field. But the competition between US and Soviet Union to achieve dominance in space was another important instance of the bipolar world. This led to the launch of first artificial satellite Sputnik by Soviet Union and later the first human space flight Yuri Gagarin in 1961. Apart from that, if you look at the real wars, for example, the Korean War, which was a significant event in the bipolar world, with US and its allies supporting South Korea, whereas Soviet Union and China supporting the North Korea. This war was fought to a stalemate, but it increased the tension between the two superpowers. Then we had the very infamous Vietnam War, with the US supporting South Vietnam and Soviet supporting the North Vietnam. Again, the war was fought to a stalemate and it contributed to anti-war. Apart from that, you had famous Cuban Missile Crisis, which was 13-day political and military standoff between US and Soviet Union over the installation of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. And so obviously, towards the end of the bipolar world, we saw the collapse of USSR. As the USSR collapsed, United States of America remained as the only superpower. And hence this era is known as unipolar world, which began after the collapse of Soviet Union in 1991. This event marked the end of bipolar world and the emergence of new global order characterized by the absence of a clear and dominant superpower. With the collapse of Soviet Union, the United States emerged as the world's sole superpower, with unrivaled military, biggest economy as well as political power, and combined with that the soft power. And so this era was characterized by the predominance of American power, with the US playing a leading role in shaping global politics, security and economic issues, and hence the unipolar world which began in 1991. So if you look at the instances which lead us to believe that USA was the sole superpower unchallenged by any other power in the world, you can have a look at various instances. For example, Operation Dust Storm 1991. The United States led a coalition of nations in a military operation against Iraq after it invaded Kuwait. This operation demonstrated the military dominance of US and its ability to lead a coalition of nations to achieve its own objectives. Then you had NATO intervention in Kosovo. In 1999, the US led a NATO military intervention in Kosovo to stop the ethnic cleansing of Albanians by Serbian forces. This intervention demonstrated the willingness of US to intervene militarily in a regional conflict and its ability to act as a global policeman. Then in the aftermath of 9/11 attacks on US, it launched a global war on terror that involved military operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other parts of the world. This war, of course, demonstrated the reach and power of US in global affairs. In fact, the attack of US on Iraq was not sanctioned by United Nations Security Council. So in 2003, US launched a military invasion of Iraq to overthrow Saddam Hussein's regime. This war was controversial and divisive. US said that Iraqi government possesses the weapon of mass destruction. But still, no evidence has been found that Iraqi government was working or had the possession of any of the weapons of mass destruction.
But it demonstrated the military might of US and its willingness to act unilaterally in pursuing its objectives. And then finally, global financial crisis of 2008 demonstrated the economic power of US and its ability to shape, either in a good way or in a bad way, the global economy. The US played a leading role in responding to the crisis and implementing policies to stabilize the global financial system. So you can say that overall, these instances demonstrated the unipolar nature of the world during the post Cold War era, when the United States was the dominant superpower, but that is changing. And so clearly, the world has been moving away from unipolarity from some time now, with several indications pointing towards this trend of multipolar world order. And here are some of the key indications. First and foremost being the rise of China. China's rapid economic growth over the past few decades has made it a major global power, challenging the dominance of US clearly. Apart from that, China is also growing very rapidly militarily. And so both of them combined together makes China follow a very assertive foreign policy, projecting its power not just in Asia but also in the extended region. Apart from that, if you look at it, the global economic system is becoming more multipolar. With the rise of emerging economies like, of course, as we know, China, but apart from that, India, Brazil, these countries are challenging the dominance of US and other developed nations and are increasingly asserting their influence in the global economic institutions. Apart from that, regional powers like Russia, Turkey, and Iran are asserting themselves on the global stage, challenging the dominance of the US in their respective regions. So, for example, Iran has openly challenged US and US sanctions. Russia not only challenged the sanction but also attacked Ukraine and annexed most of the territories of the eastern Ukraine and merged with itself. Similarly, Turkey has been ignoring the dictates of US openly, and if you look at it, India is also not paying much attention to what US wants India to do with respect to Russia or Iran. And that leads us to believe that there is a significant erosion of power of United States of America, which has been facing a number of challenges in recent years, including political polarization within the country, economic inequality which is rising, and declining global influence. And finally, if you look at it, the traditional alliances that have defined the post-World War II era are shifting, with countries forming new alliances and partnerships based on their strategic interests. And for example, the growing cooperation between Russia and China and the strained relations between the US and its traditional allies in Europe suggest a changing global landscape. So, overall, these trends suggest that the world is becoming more multipolar, with power shifting away from US towards the global actors. So we can clearly see that the US's ability to shape the geopolitics is clearly declining, as was seen in withdrawal from Afghanistan after 20 years of war, or the Russian invasion of Ukraine challenging the post-Cold War security equilibrium in Europe. These changes actually leave the world in a flux, and there is a lack of clarity on which direction the world is headed, which makes policy making harder for middle powers like India. And so, in this regard, author compares the current context with non-aligned movement which was led by our country. Because when India followed the non-alignment, it was an era of bipolarity. When India became independent, the Cold War was still in its early phases. And so, from the perspective of UPSC examination, non-alignment is also a very important concept to be understood. So, India's non-alignment policy was a foreign policy stance adopted by India during the Cold War era, which sought to maintain neutrality and tended to avoid any kind of alignment with either of the two camps led by US or USSR. And India's non-alignment policy was based on the principles of anti-colonialism and anti-imperialism. And basically, it was about promoting cooperation among developing nations. Of course, the policy was first articulated by India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in a speech in 1954, where he stated that India would not be aligned with any of the superpowers and would maintain its independence and sovereignty. So, at that point of time, the best way to preserve sovereignty, which is basically about freedom from external pressures. So external decision making will be supremely by the state of India, and there will be no one within the territory of India to challenge the decision making of the state of India, can be only ensured if India follows the stance of neutrality and alignment. And if you look at it, India followed the principle of non-alignment very consistently for 30-40 years. For example, in Bandung Conference in 1955, India played a significant role in the conference and helped develop the principles of non-alignment movement. In 1962, India went to war with China, a country with which India shared a long border. Despite the conflict, India maintained its non-alignment policy and did not seek military assistance from any major powers. Then, when it came to nuclear non-proliferation treaty, India refused to sign the NPT in 1968, which was aimed at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons. India argued that the treaty was discriminatory and did not recognize the right of all nations to peaceful nuclear technology. In 1979, when Soviet invaded Afghanistan and United States supported Afghan rebels in their fight against Soviet forces, despite US pressures, India maintained its non-alignment policy and did not join the US-led coalition. Apart from that, India maintained relationships with major powers such as US, Russia, and China without aligning itself with any of them. So overall, these instances demonstrated that India's consistent adherence to principles of non-alignment and its commitment to maintaining independence and sovereignty in international affairs was a consistent and a conscious choice. And so if you look at it, current era is not that of bipolarity, but still non-alignment is not the way to go about it. Because author here compares the old era with the new one. Because India faces an entirely new set of challenges in the new global disorder. If the center of the Cold War was Europe, the arena of the looming US-China great power contest is in Asia. It is unfolding right in India's neighborhood, and even if it stays out of it, India will feel the heat of this. During the Cold War, India did not have hostile relation with any of opposing superpowers. Today, India would be tempted to join the American bloc as it faces the direct problem with China or hostility with China. The power imbalance between India and China, which shared similar economic clout in 1970s, has widened in recent years. And so India is not in a position to act as a counterpower within Asia against China. Apart from that, there is a convergence between India and US which did not exist in the Cold War era. The US sees China as a long-term threat to the liberal international order. India sees China as a close competitor whose rise is changing the regional balance of power. So it makes sense for India to build deeper ties with West, led by US, in tackling Chinese challenge. Apart from that, Russia is a traditional partner with which India has deep defense ties. As the West has moved to isolate Russia with heavy sanctions in response to its aggression in Ukraine, India is under huge pressure from its partners to take a more critical position on Russia's actions. So according to author, India should learn from China. India should learn from China how it has behaved, and it has changed its behavior at the right time since last 40 years. Because if you look at it, Soviet Union was China's ideological brother as well as neighbor. Both of them were communist countries, but China did not want to play second fiddle to Soviets. And hence, it broke away from the Soviet communist fold and built a quasi-alliance with US and helped the imperialist bloc or the Western bloc defeat Soviet communists. And once it acquired enough economic and military power, China is now challenging US. Likewise, India's primary focus should be on transforming itself economically and militarily. It should stay focused on its rise and bridging the gap with China. It should present itself as a natural stabilizing power in South Asia and the Indian Ocean region, and a source of prosperity at a time when China is making inroads into the region. This cannot be achieved unless India keeps its social cohesion intact and continues to grow. However, author has a word of caution. China is not the only problem India faces. Its continental and maritime power in Asia. While China poses serious challenges to India's maritime influence, In continental Asia, India sees a different set of challenges, especially after the US withdrawal from Afghanistan and Taliban's return to power. To address its continental security challenges and manage its inroads into Central Asia, India has to work with Eurasian powers such as Russia and Iran, both of which are at odds with US. So abandoning its strategic autonomy and joining the US led bloc would, in fact, limit India's options in the new world, besides provoking China. Managed friction on the border might be the new norm, but an open conflict with China doesn't serve India's strategic interests. Furthermore, even if a new Cold War breaks out between US and China, let's say, the global order is unlikely to be bipolar. Because during the Cold War, the world was divided into two ideologies and two systems. But today's world is much more diverse ideologically and integrated economically. While the US is trying to drive a narrative of democracies versus autocracies, especially against the background of the Ukrainian war, it has not gained traction outside US's traditional Western alliances. There could be many power centers in the world, and hence, there could be many power centers in the new world order, and India should opt for multi engagement and not multi alignment, as some experts have suggested, for multipolar world. Instead of being stuck Instead of being sucked into any block, it should aim to create new pillars of the new order by engagement and partnership with middle powers. Next, very important topic for discussion has appeared on page number 12. Legislator facing disqualification can't attend floor test, says Supreme Court. Allowing an MP or an MLA who is facing disqualification under the anti-defection law to participate in a floor test caused by his own doings will defeat the very purpose of the 10th schedule. Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud, heading a constitution bench, has said on Tuesday. Defection, or in plain simple English, meaning the desertion of one's own group or country. And specifically if you talk about Indian constitution, the 10th schedule has defined the defection. Of course, in normal political discourse, it is understood to be leaving the party on whose ticket a person got elected to either legislature or the central parliament. We know that more often than not, people contest elections on the tickets given by the parties. Once inside the parliament or inside the legislatures, a trend has emerged in past 20-30 years where corruption and bribery has led people to defect politically, to change the political party which got them elected to another party which seems more lucrative, the party which is offering better positions in terms of ministerial positions. And so, of course, at the level of free and fair election, it is a problem. But that is something which is a moral dilemma. But if you look at this problem politically, it is a problem because defections violate the mandate of the people. A person A getting elected on a ticket issued by party 1 means that people are not only voting for the personal credential of person A, but also a lot of the people are voting for A because they agree with the manifesto, ideology, program of party 1. So when a person A got elected, it had the contribution of party 1 also. And so after getting elected, changing the political party is basically cheating with all those people who voted for you because you belong to a particular party. And because of that, anti-defection law was added into the Constitution of India through 52nd Constitutional Amendment in 1986 in form of 10th schedule to curb this menace of Ayaram and Gayaram. And what is happening in Maharashtra is the best case demonstration of that. And if you look at GS Paper 2 syllabus, Parliament and state legislature, structure, functioning, conduct of business, powers, privileges, and issues arising out of these is a part of syllabus. Not just that, in 2013 UPSC had asked, the role of individual MPs has diminished over the years, and as a result, healthy constructive debates on policy issues are not usually witnessed. How far can this be attributed to anti-defection law, which was legislated but with different intention? In 2018, UPSC asked in mains examination, individual parliamentarians' role as the national lawmaker is on a decline, which in turn has adversely impacted the quality of debates and their outcomes. Discuss. Not just that, In the latest prelims examination 2022, UPSC asked, with reference to anti-defection law in India, consider the following statements. Statement 1. The law specifies that a nominated legislator cannot join any political party within 6 months of being appointed to the House. And second statement was, the law does not provide any time frame within which the presiding officer has to decide a defection case. Now, my task is to enable you to not only answer these two mains questions, but also to be able to solve this prelims question. Let's hope that we are able to do this by the end of this discussion, and do let us know in the comment section whether you were able to solve these questions or not. So let us now begin the discussion by first understanding the provisions, the constitutional provisions of the 10th schedule, which was added to the constitution by 52nd amendment to the constitution. So which basically means that the provisions related to defection and disqualification post defection did not exist in the constitution since the beginning 1950, but rather than it was added by 52nd constitutional amendment in 1985. The amendment added the 10th schedule to the Constitution of India with an intent to curb the evil of political defections. Under the anti-defection law, legislators may be disqualified from their membership to the House if they resign from their party after being elected or defy the directions issued by the party leadership during a vote on any issue. But the matter is much more complicated than that, and for that, we will have to understand the detailed provisions of the 10th schedule to the Constitution of India, which you can see from the original text on your screen. The 10th schedule lays down the process by which legislators may be disqualified on grounds of defection by the presiding officer of a legislature based on a petition by any other member of the House. So, basically, a member of the House has to complain to the presiding officer, which more often than not is the chairman of the House, and then that person has the power to disqualify a group of members or even a single member of the House or a legislature depending upon the evidences that he or she may be produced with. Now, there should be no confusion as to fact that it applies to both parliament as well as state assemblies. So whenever we talk about chairman or chairperson, it means Speaker of the Lok Sabha in case of Lok Sabha, Vice President in case of Rajya Sabha, and speakers in case of the legislative assemblies. So disqualification on the grounds of defection is, of course, naturally divided into three membership criteria. First belongs to the members of the party, members of national or state parties, people who were elected to the legislative assembly or the parliament on a ticket given by parties like BJP, Congress, Aam Aadmi Party, Samajwadi Party. Now, these members who already are official members of a particular party can lose their membership on two very specific criteria. There are two grounds on which a member of a legislature can be disqualified if, first and foremost, that person voluntarily gives up the membership of the party, he or she becomes disqualified. And voluntarily giving up the membership is not the same as resigning from a party. Even without resigning, a legislator can be disqualified if by his conduct, the Speaker of the concerned House draws a reasonable inference that the member has voluntarily given up the membership of his party. And the second criteria on which members of political parties, if they are elected as MP or MLAs, can be disqualified is that if they vote in the House against the directions of their own party, that is, if the party asks them to vote in a particular way on a particular matter, it could be bill, it could be a resolution, and if they do not decide to vote and if they instead vote against the directions of the party which is issued by the whip of the party. Now let us know in the comment section what you understand by whip. So if whip of a party issues a direction and if the members choose to vote against those directions, then they are liable for disqualification. Now, of course, these two provisions have created a lot of problems in the way our legislators have behaved in past 20 years, and we are going to discuss its impact later on. But we are going to discuss how it impacts independent members and the members who are nominated. So when it comes to independent members, the members who are elected without joining any registered political party become disqualified to remain a member of the House if they join any political party after the election. So for example, if there is a person who was elected to the parliament, member of parliament, without the support and without the official ticket of any national or state party. After being chosen by the public as their representative, they join any of the parties, then they shall be liable for disqualification. And finally, of course, nominated members, if they join any political party after the expiration of 6 months from the date on which they take the seat to the House, they shall be liable for disqualification. So you can see that in case of both independent members as well as nominated members, the disqualification is the same, except for the fact that nominated members are given a time period of 6 months to join any political party, within which they can join any party, and they shall be absolutely fine. Their membership will not be impacted. But if they wait longer than 6 months to join a party, they will have to forego their membership to that particular house. So these are the 3 criteria over which people, either single person or a group of people, can be disqualified. However, there are 2 sets of exceptions. There are 2 conditions under which people defying their parties, people leaving their parties shall not be disqualified. And those 2 specific exceptions are merger and related to chairman of the house. So if there is a merger between 2 political parties and 2/3 of the members of the legislature party agree to the merger, they will not be disqualified. And this is directly related to what is happening in Maharashtra Assembly. Now you know that a lot of the members of Shiv Sena have declared openly that they do not wish to continue as Shiv Sena. And so they want to form a political party which is different from Shiv Sena, or they want to claim the leadership position of Shiv Sena's legislature party. Now, some experts believe that even if 2/3 of the legislatures have broken away, they will be protected from disqualification only if they merge with another political party, because the constitution says merger. Now that is why the 2 groups have gone to the Supreme Court to decide if they have the right under the constitution to form a separate political group, or they will definitely have to merge with another party. In this case, it would be BJP, to save them from disqualification. However, in case of Maharashtra, there is also a special angle, because the notices of disqualification, which has been served on 16 MLAs in case of Maharashtra, has been issued by the Deputy Speaker of the House. Now, the rules and regulations of the Maharashtra Legislative Assembly clearly says that the notices shall be issued only by the Speaker and not by the Deputy Speaker. And so that is an angle over there as well. But nonetheless, this matter shall be decided by the Supreme Court. But there is another exception also. If a person is elected as the Speaker of the Lok Sabha or Chairman of Rajya Sabha, and then he resigns from his party or rejoins the party once he demits from the post, shall not be disqualified. That is also an exception, because it is expected that once you hold the position of the chairmanship, you are expected to behave in a neutral way. And for that political neutrality or non-partisanship, it is required at some level that you leave or exit the membership of a political party. And if you're doing that, you shall not be disqualified under the defection, anti-defection law. As far as power to disqualify or power of disqualification is concerned, the chairman of the house, which we have discussed, will be holding the power to disqualify the members. Now, we have seen the provisions of anti-defection law. We have seen how it binds the legislature by the diktats of the party headquarters or the high command. So the obvious question which should arise in your mind is that how has it impacted the functioning of legislators? We know that there are 3 very specific roles of a legislature. One is, of course, legislating on laws. Second is, in case of India, which is the parliamentary form of government, where the executive is accountable to the legislature. The members have to hold the government accountable. And the third is as a representative of the people. Starting with the role of a legislature. In a parliamentary system, we all know, as we have said, legislators are expected to exercise their independent judgment while determining their position on any issue. The choice of the member may be based on combination of public interest, constituency interest, and party affiliations after all. Now, this fundamental freedom of choice could be undermined if the member is mandated to vote along the party line on every bill and every resolution. Even if the member has an opinion that differs from his party leadership, he does not have the freedom to vote as per his choice. And that is how the role of independent legislators have been impacted. And we can clearly see that it has declined in past 30 years. The second question is, how has the anti-defection law affected legislators' ability to hold the government accountable? And that is one of the key features of parliamentary democracy. We know that this accountability is tested through questions posed to ministers, discussions on various government policies, and by debating the national issues. Now, the anti defection law deters a legislator from his duty to hold the government accountable by requiring him to follow the instruction of the party leadership on almost every decision. Therefore, he or she may debate and dissent from his party opinion on an issue in parliament, but will still be compelled to vote as per the instruction of the party whip, which is very different when you compare this with United Kingdom Parliament, or for that matter, the Senate of United States of America, where the members of the party openly defy the party line and vote according to their own wisdom, or for that matter, wishes of their own states or the people who they are representing. And finally, it has affected a citizen's ability to hold his or her elected representative accountable, and so, in essence, it has disconnected the public and the government. Because in India, citizens choose their member for a period of 5 years. During this term, they can judge the performance of the member based on his or her parliamentary record. For example, a citizen may have a strong opinion on the issue of land acquisition. They may convey their opinion to the legislator and ask him to vote in a particular way. Now, the legislator would have to justify his decision if he differs from such issue. Thus, citizens have the opportunity to have their views represented in the legislature, and if they feel the legislator has failed to do so, they can express their displeasure or even vote out the representative in the next election. That is how it works. But under the anti-defection law, this accountability mechanism breaks down. Every member is required to vote as per the direction issued by the party, which he can easily justify his voting decision and absolve himself of the representational responsibility of his voters by merely saying that the party whip compelled him to vote in a particular fashion. And that is how there is increasing disconnection between the public and the government. But it's not as simple as it seems. There are other challenges which the anti-defection law is facing. Then, apart from its negative impact on the role of legislators, has anti-defection law really been effective? Are there no defections? The reason because of which we are taking up anti-defection in so detail today is because there has been a significant defection in Maharashtra, and this is just not the first example. If you take into account last 2-3 years, there have been several Andhra Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh, Goa. These instances, to count few, in last 2-3 years, where these defections have led to the toppling of the government. Then the second issue is that it really curbs the genuine dissent. The law often restricts a legislature from voting in line with his conscience, judgment and interests of his electorate. Now, they vote as political party issue directions. They tell the members whether to abstain, to vote for or against a particular resolution or bill, and this is done for even those bills or issues or resolutions which absolutely do not have any impact on the stability of the government. Then the next set of problem comes from the unquestionable power which has been given to the speaker. It's written governor. So the 10th schedule gave Speaker of the Lok Sabha and Assemblies unquestionable power in deciding petitions seeking disqualification of MPs and MLAs under anti-defection law. We all know that, we have understood that. Now the problem is that the speaker holds the office until he or she enjoys the support of majority of the members. Now, each and every time you have a new government coming up, most likely you will have a new speaker. Now, the problem is that a particular speaker or a sitting speaker who is right now officiating the post of speaker would never want that government to be toppled. And that is why, inevitably, most of the cases of defections or most of the cases of application of anti-defection law holds against the members of the opposition party in the center or in the states, because the speaker themselves would never want to get removed from the post. Now this was challenged in Supreme Court, and the decision was Kihoto Holohan case in 1992, in which the Supreme Court ruled that speakers, while deciding petitions under anti-defection law, exercise judicial powers which are similar to a tribunal. And since speaker acts as a tribunal, their decision should be subject to scrutiny by both High Court and Supreme Court. So basically, the Quijotto Holohan case of 1992 brought the judicial scrutiny over the decisions of Speaker in cases of anti-defection law. And then finally, the major challenge which the anti-defection law faces is that it is open to interpretations. It is very, very subjective in nature. For example, the first ground for disqualifying a legislator for defecting from a party is his voluntarily giving up the membership of his party. Now, this term is subject to interpretation. For example, in Ravi S. Nayak versus Union of India 1994, the Supreme Court had held that voluntarily giving up membership does not necessarily mean that the legislator needs to formally resign, and this can be inferred from members' conduct as well. The court had said, even in the absence of formal resignation from the membership, an inference can be drawn from the conduct of a member that he was voluntarily given up his membership of a political party to which he or she belonged. In other words, if an MLA does not tender a formal resignation from their party, but stands for election as an MP from another party or takes up a position in another party, that would also amount to voluntarily giving up their membership and be grounds for disqualification. And so you can clearly see that not everything has a crystal clear clarity when it comes to anti-defection law, and hence there is definitely a need for reform. The first and foremost reform could be that there is a need for alternate independent mechanism. In fact, Supreme Court has also said that the Parliament should amend the Constitution to substitute the Speaker with a permanent tribunal who is headed by a retired judge of a Supreme Court or Chief Justice of a High Court, or some other outside independent mechanism to ensure that such disputes are decided both swiftly and impartially. And we have seen why and how the continuance of Speaker as the deciding authority is not going to be partial ever. Administrative Reforms Commission, for example, has recommended that the issue of disqualification of members on grounds of defection should be decided by the President or the Governor on the advice of Election Commission. So this is going to take care of the impartiality. What about the swiftness? Because we have seen that in many of the cases, the decisions are not taken for 2, 3, 4 years. And so there is a need for reasonable time frame to decide the disqualification cases, even if by the Speaker. And so we need to amend the Constitution to insert that time period of, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, before which a decision has to be taken by the Speaker. And then finally, and this is one of the most important amendment that we can recommend, is that the provisions of anti-disqualification law should be applicable only on annual budget, which is important for every state and the center, and on matters which decide the continuance of a government, for example, no confidence motion, and on such matters which do not decide the continuity of the government, the whips should not be issued and the party members should not be expected to vote in a particular fashion. They should be able to express their wills. They should be given the freedom to express themselves freely without any hindrance, which is what the idea of creation of parliament and legislative assemblies with so much of power was. So I hope that provisions related to anti-defection law, what are the constitutional provisions, what are the reasons because of which it was enacted, how is it impacting the functioning of the parliament, what are the challenges it is facing, and what are the reforms is clear to you by now. Let us now move on to the next discussion. ISRO successful in key test for India's third moon mission. So ISRO has successfully conducted the flight acceptance hot test of the CE-20 cryogenic engine that will power the cryogenic upper stage of LVM-3 launch vehicle for the Chandrayaan-3 mission. Now, if you read this news, there are a lot of terms which appear which might be relevant from the perspective of prelims as well as mains examination. For example, terms like CE-20, cryogenic engine, what is the cryogenic, what is Chandrayaan-3 mission. If you look at the previous year questions, in 2019, UPSC had asked, with reference to India's satellite launch vehicles, consider the following statements. PSLVs launch the satellites useful for Earth resources monitoring, whereas GSLV are designed mainly to launch communication satellites. Satellites launched by PSLV appear to remain permanently fixed in the same position in the sky as viewed from a particular location on Earth. Statement 3 was GSLV Mach 3 is a 4-staged launch vehicle with the first and third stages using solid rocket motors and the second and fourth stages using liquid rocket engines. Also, UPSC has asked questions on missions like Mangalyaan. Let's not worry about the right question, but first, let's do the reverse engineering on the previous year question. What has UPSC asked? So UPSC expected us to know what is the basic difference between PSLV and GSLV? What are the number of stages and what is the actual fuel which is being used, whether it is a solid or it is a liquid? Apart from that, if you look at 2017 mains question, India has achieved remarkable success in unmanned space missions including Chandrayaan and Mars orbiter mission, but has not ventured into manned space mission both in terms of technology and logistics. Explained critically. So you can see that when it comes to both prelims and mains, space technology and space science is a very important part of the syllabus, and hence let's have this discussion on CE20, which is a cryogenic rocket engine. What is cryogenic? We will understand in a minute. Which is developed by Liquid Propulsion Systems Center, which is a subsidiary of ISRO. It has been developed to power the upper stage of LMV-3. It is the first Indian cryogenic engine to feature a gas generator cycle. The combustion chamber burns liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen at 6 megapascals pressure with 5.05 engine mixture ratio. This will enhance the LMV-3 payload capability up to 450 gram with additional propellant loading. Now coming to the question as to what is cryogenic and why is it needed. So cryogenic is the last stage of space launch vehicles. It is if you talk just about the word, it is the study of production and behavior of material at extremely low temperatures. Now, why do we need extremely low temperatures? We need extremely low temperatures in order to liquefy oxygen and liquefy hydrogen, because if you do not reduce the temperature to minus 183 degrees Celsius and minus 253 degrees Celsius, hydrogen and oxygen will just be in gaseous form. Since they will be in gaseous form, their density will be very low and you cannot carry a large amount of oxygen and hydrogen into space. And if you cannot carry the large amount of fuel, you cannot go very far. In order to go far, you need more fuel. In order to carry more fuel, you need to reduce the volume and hence you need to liquefy, and hence the cryogenics. And the good part is that you get water for the manned mission by burning fuel which you need to cover the distance, and this is nothing but what cryogenic is all about. So this is nothing but something which was previously known as Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle Mark 3 or GSLV MK3. It is a 3-stage medium lift launch vehicle developed by ISRO and is configured as 3-stage. Remember the previous year question, you need to know the stages. With 2 solid strap-on motors, 1 liquid core stage and high thrust cryogenic upper stage, which is the last stage of the cycle of the carrier. Now coming on to Chandrayaan 3, which is a planned 3rd lunar exploration mission by ISRO. It will be a mission repeat of Chandrayaan 2, but will only include a lander and a rover similar to that of Chandrayaan 2. It will not have an orbiter, but its propulsion module will behave like communications relay satellite. Apart from that, it will carry scientific payloads, lander, which will actually touch down on the surface of the moon, will have CHASTE or Chandra's Surface Thermophysical Experiment to measure the thermal conductivity and temperature on the surface. Instrument for Lunar Seismic Activity or ILSA for measuring the seismicity around the landing site. Langmuir probe to estimate the plasma density and its variations. A passive laser retroreflector array from NASA is also being accommodated in the same lander. Apart from that, the rover will have alpha particle X-ray spectrometer or APXS and laser induced breakdown spectroscope or LIBS for deriving the elemental composition in the vicinity of the landing site. It is scheduled to be launched in 2023. The mission objectives are threefold: to demonstrate safe and soft landing on lunar surface, to demonstrate rover roving on the moon, and to conduct in situ scientific experiments. This last news for today, RBI's new pilot project on coin vending machine. So RBI Governor Shashikant Das had stated during the last Monetary Policy Committee address that the apex banking regulator, in collaboration with banks, would be launching a pilot project to assess the functioning of a QR code based coin vending machine. So, vending machines would dispense coins with the requisite amount being debited from customers' account using United Payment Interface or UPI. So, just like when you scan a code, an amount is automatically debited from your account and it goes into the account of the person to which you are transferring the money. The same way, now you can use the QR code and UPI base to withdraw coins from coin vending machines. Now, it is being done because it eases the presence of small liquidity in the economy. It meets the demand of small denomination currency in remote areas. It brings ease of smaller transactions. Supply of coins is very high with limited disbursement. Vending machine would raise the overall supply of coins and reduce overall cost of storage of coins. It would eliminate the need for physical tendering of banknotes and their authentication, and it would avoid counterfeit currency entering into the machine and thereby the currency circulation. If you look at the overall significance of coins, total value of circulation of rupee coins stood at around 22,857 crore as of December 30 last year. While for rupee currency notes, the value is at least 1,000 times more. For perspective, coins in India are issued in denomination of 50 paise, 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 5 rupee, 10 rupees and 20 rupees. In some exceptional cases, some coins are issued for more value as well. Coins of up to 50 paise are called small coins, while those of 1 rupee and above are called rupee coins. Now, if you look at the limitations involved, access to digital payment is still very limited, especially in rural India. Digital connectivity in the remotest areas of India is not yet developed. There is a regular smuggling of rupee coins to neighboring countries. 5 rupee coins are being smuggled into Bangladesh from India to be melted down for making razor blades. Apart from that, when the inflation goes above a normal threshold, product prices reaches a certain level that small coins cannot buy them. This causes phasing out of small denomination coins. Under such condition, promotion to currency coins seems more futile. So if you want to have two keywords take away, currency chest. These are storehouses where banknotes and rupee coins are stocked on behalf of the Reserve Bank for distribution to bank branches in their area of operation, and small coin depot, where some banks are authorized to establish small coin depots to stock and distribute small coins, that is coins of value below rupee 1, to bank branches in their area of operation.